The key to understanding Scotland is knowing how such stunning natural beauty shapes the pattern of life within it. Deer roam the slopes of these high mountains as they have done for centuries. Sometimes in a highland loch where the sun is trapped by the pine forest, you can catch sight of an osprey. Every year, Scotland's salmon rivers spawn new generations of the king of fish. By the west coast, the warm Atlantic Ocean adds its own special influence. And only in Scotland does the landscape produce just the right combination of natural ingredients to give life to that special secret, malt whiskey. Fragrant with peat and pure water, and the malted barley from which it takes its name. But the different climates and landscapes make whiskies with individual characters. The single malts, the handcrafted whiskies that are different. In one sense, the pattern of different characters in the malt whiskies is easy to understand. The great island malts from the islands off the west coast. The Highland malts with those from Speyside among them. And lightest of all, the lowland malts. The beauty of Scotland was revealed as the Ice Age retreated in Western Europe. In the Highlands, deep valleys were gouged, later to be inhabited by a race of people who could win a living from the thin mountain soil. To the west, a complex reef of islands was scattered. The people who settled here were fisherfolk. To the south and to the north, great plains were rolled, perfect for farming both cattle and crops. And that variety and difference shapes Scotland's single malt whiskies, all of them individual. Heavy with peat in the west and the islands, lighter and sweeter in the south and the highlands. The classic Highland single malt whisky is Dalwhinnie, a surprising contrast to the rugged and desolate landscape which created it. At over 1,000 feet, Dalwhinnie is Scotland's highest distillery. It straddles two mountain passes to earn its ancient Gaelic name of meeting place. For this is Drove Road country. Here, Scotland's cattle trails met as the drovers made a busy crossroads of this high mountain pass. And for the drovers, Dalwhinnie had a special advantage. With the cattle, they took the malt whiskey down to the market towns of Perth and Stirling and Edinburgh, and made a welcome extra income. It takes a resourceful people to make a life at Dalwhinnie. In winter, you could be snowbound for weeks at a time. But making malt whiskey is the perfect way to let the hard winters slip by. You can remember the short summers that grew the barley for the malt and gave the flush of heather that over the centuries made the peat. It takes 15 winters for Dalwhinnie malt whiskey to come of age. 15 years spent in oak casks, while the spirit mellows and matures into a gentle whiskey with a heathery, lacy finish. The taste is light with a fruity sweet aroma, an aromatic malt that is very easy to drink. The snowmelt water held on the high mountains till late spring and summer is at the heart of the pure Scottish rivers. In the Monolea Mountains above Dalwhinnie, the Spey rises and begins its rush seaward. It is this water, run over impervious granite, clean and untainted, that gives the Speyside malts their light to medium character. The classic Speyside malt whisky, Cragganmore, has always been prized for its unique and individual style. The distillery that stands here today has grown from the still house that went with almost every farm. The countryside that borders the Spey is a very complete landscape, and barley is the perfect grain for growing here. The water from the river and the golden barley make their magic in the pot stills, and the byproducts feed the cattle. It's a landscape in harmony, where one strength builds on another. When the railway became a part of the landscape, its opportunities were embraced at Cragganmore. This was the first distillery to send its single malt out by train, and so the world learned a taste for Cragganmore. The Victorian age of invention and innovation gave Cragganmore's pot stills T-shaped necks, where most others are swan-necked. And true lovers of single malt whisky respect and enjoy the difference. For local eccentricities like these shape the taste of malt whisky and make Cragganmore the classic Speyside malt. The right age for Cragganmore is 12 years. By then, the magic is complete and the whisky has fully developed. A haughty single malt held in high esteem, dry on the palate with a hint of peat smoke in the finish. The islands off the west coast of Scotland make a very different kind of whisky, and the island of Islay is the definitive whisky island, famous for its peaty, smoky, strong single malts. Chief among the Islay malt whiskies is Lagavulin. Like much of Scotland, Islay lies under a blanket of peat. It colours and flavours the water for Lagavulin malt. And cut and stacked and dried in the wind, it provides the only fuel that the highlands and islands have in abundance. The Lagavulin distillers have harnessed both the water and the fuel to the traditional ways found in the malt barn and the still room to create their distinctive single malt whisky. Malt whisky gets its name from malting, the process the barley goes through to unlock the sugars that its grains contain. For it is the sugars that will be fermented into alcohol. The heat of peat fires stops the malting at just the right point. Memories of the land and the seasons are gifted to the process as the peat smoke rises through the drying malt and its distinctive aroma is captured and held. In the great bonded warehouse at Lagavulin, the influence of the sea is everywhere. In stormy weather, the gales throw the ocean spray against the walls, while in the benign intervals, the sea salt is heavy on the breeze that filters through. And so a special character is added to the taste as the whisky waits out its 16 years of maturation. Lagavulin is the classic Islay malt, 16 years old, distinctive and robust, with a rich and full aroma. The smoky peaty malt taste is a delight to the palate, a malt to be sipped and savoured. North of Islay, the Isle of Skye is separated from the mainland by just a narrow neck of water. Here, the Culin Mountains thrust jagged peaks over 3,000 feet above the sea. The people of Skye are fiercely jealous of their unique identity from the other islands, and that uniqueness carries into their only whiskey. For Talisker is the only single malt made on Skye, and it is as different as the island itself. In 1745, more than 80 years before the distillery at Talisker was built, government forces harried the escaping rebel Bonnie Prince Charlie across the island after his defeat at the Battle of Culloden Moor. To quash their rebellious spirit and to punish the islanders for giving him sanctuary, the young men were forced into the army. At drumhead musters all over Skye, they reluctantly took the king's shilling, and so found themselves soldiers of the crown. If there can be a bright side to so black a tale, it's that they took with them the love for the authentic taste of their homeland, and so the world learned of Talisker. The same mountains and sea lochs that today shelter the distillery and moderate the influence of the Atlantic concealed the French ship which was waiting to carry Bonnie Prince Charlie to safety. In those days, distilling was a secret art. And to find the best peat and water, the distillers had to know every hidden part of their island. Even today, it is the same secret of peat and water and soft sea air that shape the taste of Talisker's single malt whiskey. Complex, sometimes hard to understand until you begin to love it. Full-flavoured with a distinctive, lingering peaty taste. Well-balanced with a slightly sweet aroma. Part of the Talisker secret is its strength. It takes 10 years to reach its peak, and so that is when the casks are sent to the mainland for bottling. Then it begins its long journey to places that still hold the Scottish prince and the Scottish soldier in their history. And with them, Talisker single malt whiskey. Places which lie beyond the reach of roads need ships and seaports to carry goods and people to and from them. Oban became a major tourist centre in the late Victorian era, but before that it was already an important trading port. You could be out of Islay and Skye and away to America or Africa or India via Oban. For the West Highlands and Islands, this was the natural distribution centre. But it wasn't only other people's goods that went out from here. Oban had grown up around its own distillery, still here, right at the heart of the town. And Oban's single malt is the classic West Highland malt whiskey. There are just 2 pot stills here, just as always, making limited batches of a fine malt whiskey that until now has been a closely guarded preference of the local people. The Oban men believe that their special malt whiskey is at its best if it lies in a cask a full 14 years. So that's how long it stays here. Malt whiskey was traditionally aged in oak sherry casks, but no one quite knows why the maturing spirit responds differently to English oak or Spanish or American. And if an Oban man stays with the kind of casks he's always used, then he's more likely to be right than wrong. Where Oban malt whiskey is concerned, you go with the traditional ways that have been proved for centuries. At Oban, the reward of tradition is an excellent all-round malt. A fresh, delicate hint of peat in the aroma and a long, smooth finish position this Oban single malt between a Highland Speyside and an Islay. Scotland's classic malt whiskies were sought after all over the world and could stand their hand in any company. But in truth, the toughest market in the world was right here in Scotland, Edinburgh. If you could sell in Edinburgh, you could sell anywhere. The capital attracted to itself the best of all the malt whiskies that the drovers could bring from all quarters of the country. The nobles of the land and even royalty demanded and got the best of all things. And of all spirits, they judged Scotland's single malt whiskies supreme. The low hills to the south of Edinburgh have always been the capital's larder. Its country famed for the quality of its produce, meat and drink fit for a king's table. But the capital drew to itself not only the great Scottish malt whiskies, but also the men who made them. And so to find a malt whisky distillery here is no real surprise. Over the generations, it was local Edinburgh tastes, sharpened with long association to know and demand the best, that shaped and refined the lowland malts. The classic lowland single malt whisky is Glenkinchie. At Glenkinchie Distillery, there is still ample opportunity to find the single malt of old. A distillery purpose-built in the Victorian age by John and George Raitt to answer a demand from people who knew the best. It was their inventiveness and ingenuity that gathered the best people and techniques and concentrated them here where they could be closer to their market. Skills handed down father to son over generations of Highland and Island master distillers. At the end of the day, it's the men that make the whisky as much as the water or barley or peat. Years old, Glenkinchie has a light, delicate nose, a clean aroma and a pale colour. The taste is smooth and pleasing, with a hint of dryness. Scotland's classic malt whiskies, each one representing traditional excellence. Every cask is nosed during maturation by a man of long experience who can recognise and guarantee perfection. The great island malts, Lagavulin, Talisker, Oban from the west coast, Highland malts and the classic Speyside malts, Dalwhinnie, Cragganmore, and lightest of all, the lowland malts, Glenkinchie. Variety of character in the whisky, born of the variety in the landscape. Within the regions, there are as many different whiskies as there are distilleries. All are good, but only a few are truly classic. Scotland's classic malts, a range of single malt whiskies recognised by experts as the authentic, traditional taste of the regions which produce them. carefully selected for their individual characteristics of age and strength and style, allowing the discerning palate to at least begin to understand some of the complexities of the most prestigious drinks in the world. Scotland's classic malt whiskies.